Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callis. This is a scheduled McKinney Monday coming to you at episode number 600. So the episode numbers are at the magic number of 600. However, there are probably a good 20 or 30 sundry non-numbered episodes floating around out there. So please feel free to check into those when you have time, when I don't have episodes, which is pretty rare. But I will tell you, this week and next week will be very short episodes, short and sweet, if you will. I have an extra task at hand, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it in today's episode. Oh, it is the 11th of March, 2024, the year of our Lord, 2024, and 2024 is already shaping up to be quite interesting. So, but we're going to stick with the local stuff today. So here we go on. Well, you know what? Not on with the program. Final reminder for today, at least. The best way you can continue to show your support, make a difference, and help me grow the show is to like, share, and subscribe to the program. If you're following the program, if you're getting the notifications, you get to see the episodes that don't get promoted. You get to see the things that get blocked, if you will, by the algorithm. Sometimes I think it takes more time promoting the show than it is doing the show, and that may be true, but that helps. It makes a huge difference, and you can join me over on the social media of your choice. I have a page and a group on Facebook. I am a pro over at Gab now, and I still drop in over at MeWe. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the interaction when it occurs. I'm not looking to fix anybody. I am looking to give you information, and hopefully you make decisions to change your view or your thoughts on certain things based upon that information that you otherwise would not have. And again, for the time being, my show is still available on YouTube. Okay. All right. So here we go. Now on with the program. Okay. So the reason why the episodes are going to be short and sweet these next 2 weeks is I am the chairman for the Republican Party Calhoun County SD8 Platform Committee, which means that at least 3 nights this week, I will be taking meetings that will be a couple hours long, all day, Saturday, and then a couple of days next week, and a final day to submit a final report in preparation for the 23rd of March, which will be the SD8 convention. Now, if you are not a Republican, you're probably rolling your eyes right now. Why do we care? Well, I just want you to know this is an opportunity for the people, for the general public, for the grassroots to be heard, for they have an opportunity to determine what our platform states. Now, our platform, which is, I would say, egregiously long, excessively thorough, lays out all the things that a majority, and I will say a vast majority, of the delegates at the previous statewide convention agree upon. And every 2 years, we go in and we update it to reflect the changes or the good things or bad things that have occurred over the previous 2 years. In addition to that, we get to have some say on what are going to be the legislative priorities for the next term. Now, I will be blatantly honest with you. I believe the vast majority of elected officials pay almost no attention to what the platform says. In fact, I will tell you that just reading through the platform can be numbing at times. And I don't say that to be mean, and I don't say that to be rude, but when you have 40 some odd pages of a document that lays out in very detailed minutia what the Republican Party stands for, it's really hard to communicate that to the general public. It's really hard to sell that to somebody. We need more sizzle. That's just my opinion. So, that being said, I will support and put in anything that comes before the committee. We will submit it to the SD8 convention, and we will update our platform accordingly, because that is the role, that is the job, and that is what we should be doing. We have had some significant wins over the last 2 to 4 years. Has it been perfect? No. Are they absolute? No. But they are significant wins. We've also fallen behind in a couple of areas. And the party has to adapt its positions and move forward. But again, we have to be careful. We have to stay balanced. We have to think clearly. And a lot of this stuff is determined by emotions. Now, emotions matter. Emotions sometimes is the sizzle, if you will. But we have to also be aware of the bigger picture. So one of the things that I'm planning on presenting is, hey, this is what we think. This is what we believe. This is the ramifications of this. Does this help us, or is this more minutia? And again, it's up to the committee and, in a larger extent, up to the convention as a whole to determine what do they think, what do they want. It's not my job to put my thumb on the scale. It's not my job to delete or edit things. But we shall see how this plays out. So it's interesting. It's going to be time-consuming, but I think it's well worth it. I think it's very important because it is the opportunity for we, the people, to be heard. Even though 10% of it is maybe taken up by, 5%, 3%. I don't know. Very small percentage of it actually gets to the legislature as an actionable item that they care to do anything about. But we, the people, get to have our say. And that's very important. That directly ties into elections, right? If elections don't matter, if elections don't have consequences, nothing ever changes. We saw flat out at the state level, there were significant changes in the primaries and different people won. Whether the governor pushed them, the AG pushed them, or the lieutenant governor got involved, or whatever, there were significant changes. There are a couple of very interesting runoffs, at least two of them that I couldn't have predicted if I tried. This is going to be interesting to see how these play out. And I imagine there's a certain level of horse trading going on at the state level, right? These high elected officials, they want their positions, their desires to be heard. They impress that upon the lower level elected officials. For better or for worse, that's what happens. And we, the people, we need to be aware of this. So that ties into the next step, right? The most important thing is education. I see posts, I see social media, I see observations in the media itself, and I hear from leaders. The grassroots doesn't understand or doesn't know what's going on. Well, that's a responsibility of the elected official. It's a responsibility of the club leaders. It's a responsibility of the party leaders to make sure that they understand what's going on, that they understand how these things function. But it also is the responsibility of you, the individual voter, to take the time, to take the effort to learn what's going on, to understand who the actors are, to understand what's at play, what the angles are. There are a number of things that are, let's say, behind the curtain that occur and push issues and fight the battles both for us on our behalf and opposed to us and against us. I mean, everybody's heard the name Soros, but do you understand what he and his organizations have been doing or where they're pushing us? You know, and a lot of people have heard about, well, the people that fund, various other groups. Let's go with just Texas Scorecard for that matter. That group is highly instrumental in holding our Republican officials accountable. Now, you don't have to like everything that they're trying to hold them accountable for. You don't have to like the people that fund it. You don't have to like anything, but you need to understand what it is and why it matters. Those groups do that all the time. And then there are the consultants. Some are better than others. Then there are the lobbyists. They're not going to go away. I mean, look no further than Texans for Lawsuit Reform. Back in the day, they did some really good things. It's a little sketchy what they're doing now. And if you look at the Realtors Association, they spend a lot of money to get elected officials put in office and get their things done. But you ever stop to think of why? What is it they're so concerned about? What do they want? Or, for instance, the casino PAC, right? Sands PAC. They come in and they want to influence what happens. Now, I, for one, I'm not necessarily married to the proposition that there should be no expansion of gambling, but I'll be clear with you. My platform doesn't want it. My party doesn't want it. My SD district doesn't want it. I don't think it's worth fighting over. If it's that important that I go waste money I can go to Oklahoma. I can go to Louisiana. Or I can go to Vegas. And I should say I've not utilized a casino in any of those locations. But that being said, if that's something you really want to do, who cares? Go do it. I just don't know that Texas gets an overall benefit. I mean, they sell us on the revenue that's going to come in, but what they don't talk about is the costs associated with it. What they don't talk about is the expenses that are built into doing those things. Now, could they be done right? Could they be done at a smaller scale? Well, maybe, but that's not what they're looking at. That's not what they're selling. They're all over the map. Again, just like every other pack, they tell you what they want you to hear and go and do another thing. This is part of the education process. You have to know who these organizations are. You have to know who funds them and what their end goals are. And then you have to see, do they give an enormous amount of money to my candidate or my representative? And then factor that in. Is my representative actually still working for me? Or are they, in fact, working for this organization that funds their existence and then just throw us a bone a time or two? Or a dog collar, if you want. That being said, once you understand that dynamic and once you understand the pain points, right, for a well-liked long-term incumbent to get knocked below 55% is a significant thing. And it'd be interesting to look in how and the why that happened. It'd be interesting to see who was motivating and who was involved in that. Was it strictly a grassroots thing? Was it somebody that was working the grassroots angle but brought in somebody with deeper pockets? Was it strictly a, let's call it an emotional response to something that elected official did or took part of? It could be any number or all of those things. But the fact of the matter is, you need to always be aware as a grassroots person, as a voter, who is it that your representatives and your state senators are actually working for? And you can tell by the amount of money that they take from the various PACs and lobbyists. Now, again, that may not be a problem for you. You might, in fact, approve of what those PACs and lobbyists are trying to accomplish. That's not necessarily always a bad thing, but it is something you need to be aware of. It is something that should be more public knowledge. We've often joked about the idea that elected officials ought to be required to wear jackets with all their sponsors on it, like a NASCAR driver, right? So I, for one, would like to know if my state representative is being highly funded by TLR or highly funded by the Realtors Association. Those are not necessarily bad things, depending on where you are on that spectrum, but it's something that we should know. Likewise, if the unions particularly like this elected official or that elected official, I think we should know, especially if they're public employee unions. Because a public employee union and public employee lives off of our taxes. Now, I'm not saying they don't do a valuable job. I don't think anybody doesn't value what they do, but it is interesting to see how they affect the outcome of certain elections, and people ought to be paying attention to that. They ought to be aware of it and consider that when they get involved in individual elections. Is this a good thing? Is this a neutral thing, or is it a bad thing? It could be all of the above, depending on what the issue is or what the subject is. But again, if you don't know, you don't know. We have to spend the time to look into these things, and we are somewhat dependent on our party leaders and entirely dependent on some of our club leaders to take the time and investigate and talk about what these things mean. How do they reflect to you and I as individual members of the grassroots or individual members of the voting public? Now, I have a unique perspective in that I guess it would be fair to say I have a unofficial leadership role in the county party that I live in, mostly because I work and I help, not because of anything special about me per se, which means that if you've got the time, if you're willing to do so, you too can be effective and kind of gain a little status, if you will, in the county party or even perhaps the state party. If you're a retired person and you're even nominally interested in politics, I don't understand why you wouldn't be involved. Now that I've said all that, I've laid all that groundwork about how important it is to be educated, informed, and involved, let me take a pause, because there's a counterpoint here that is valid. If you're spending all this time, money, and effort, and you're getting nothing out of it, why do you do it? What do you have to show for all the things that you have done? Where is the payback for your efforts? Where is the payoff for getting these people elected? Those are all very fair and valid points, and I've heard them more than once. Here's the only answer I can give you. For evil to succeed, all it takes is for good men to do nothing, right? That's a pretty famous quote, and multiple people have said it over the years and the decades in various versions. Or better yet, if we want to neutralize Christianity, the best way we can do that is to keep the Christians out of the government. Or if you want to consider the other thing, as a parent, your responsibility is your children first and foremost. If you're sending them off to Rome to go serve Caesar, why are you surprised when they come back as Romans? Why are you surprised when they come back worshiping Caesar? Right? These are all the things that we have to deal with, the things that we need to consider when we're taking action, when we're getting involved. What's the priority? What's most important? Well, for many years, I focused on how do I protect my kids? How do I improve my kids' situation? How do I get them prepared to be good adults, good citizens, involved, interested, educated? Now, no, they're not going to know everything. They're not going to be able to keep up with every little thing that happens, nor do I want them to. That's, quite frankly, tedious at times, but they need to at least be aware and know what their resources are, know where they can go to get those answers. The best thing in the world that would happen in my mind is if you don't know what you're voting for, don't vote. I mean, if you're really, truly excited for more socialism or for more government regulations or more handouts to people that don't want to work, and that's really what you want, okay, fine. I respect that. You're wrong. I'm going to fight against that. But at least you know that's what you want. You want to get more freebies, or you want to make sure that, parents can kill their child in the womb. Whatever it is your issue is, as long as that's what you really want and that's what you're going to support, you're wrong. I'm going to oppose you, but at least you know that and you acknowledge that. But on the flip side, we, the people, me, my friends, my allies, if we're working against you and we can't articulate what it is we oppose, we're not willing to say, this is what's wrong, this is why you're wrong, and this is what it ought to be, or this is what it ought not be, we're no better than anyone else. We're not doing our jobs. We're not protecting our constitutional republic. We're just being motivated or manipulated by emotion or doing what we're told. So we're really not any kind of vanguard. We're not really doing the right thing. We're just on the right side of an issue. So that being said, now that I've laid that all out, I've had that big discussion there. Let me go to the final point. There is always something. Every election cycle always has something. Now, I'm very interested to see what happens between now and November. It's going to be very interesting. But here in McKinney, we have an election in May. There's going to be some bonds. There may or may not be a charter amendment. There's various different things that are going to come up that we, the people, are going to vote on. And I'm asking you, please take the time to look at the issue or to look at the proposition and determine whether or not you think this is a good idea. I'm not always opposed to taking on debt. I just want to know what I'm taking on debt for and what am I getting in return for it. I'm not so willing to gamble it on a potential payoff by some kind of business when they get all the profits and we get all the losses. But then again, if it's something that's a general boost to the public, like a park or some other public facility, hey, that's the price of doing business. That's part of having a city. And do I think that's a fair amount to be spent on that is the question, right? Again, we have to be aware of these things. We have to know whether or not that's a good investment. And you can't trust people that just tell you to shut up and take their word for it. You can't trust people that say this study that they paid for that had a preordained outcome is adequate. You have to be willing to read between the lines. You have to be willing to look into opposing views. Let me give you a brief analysis of something real quick here. And this is important because it's related, but it's an analogy. As a history major, as a poli-sci major, one of the things that I did a lot of is read histories or read books about a historical event. Now, granted, oftentimes you're only getting one side of the story, or you're getting quote unquote the accepted view. There's something called revisionist history. Now, some revisionist history is really, really good, and some is absolute trash. And you don't always know which is the really good revisionist history and which is the trash history. The only way you can know it by looking into who the author was, what their goals were, and what is it that they were actually looking at correcting. And once you've determined that, you will learn a lot of very interesting things. I mean, case in point, I always was vaguely aware of our time in the Philippines. That is the United States government, as a result of the Spanish-American War. I was also aware of the time we were in Cuba after the Spanish left. And that's how we picked up Puerto Rico. But what I wasn't aware of is all the different things that we did while we were there. Some of them very, very bad. Some of them more benign. I say that you could maybe make the argument that in the long term there was a positive outcome, but I'm not sure that the native people there would agree with me, because I have the benefit of being completely removed from it, both in time and space. So then I had to defer to somebody that I knew that was a native-born Filipino. And I asked him point blank, how does this factor in? I know you love America. You're a great patriot. I respect the heck out of you. I read about this. This is very disturbing to me that this is something we did. How do you get past that? And he gave me a very enlightening answer. And I'm not going to get into it today, but just suffice it to say, he gave me more information of what happened after the fact and how that, in his mind, made up for all the terrible things that occurred. And it also gave more context to why those terrible things happened and what was at play there. I mean, surprise, surprise, Islam was involved, but be that as it may, if we don't give the whole history, if it's not available, people don't know. People perish from lack of knowledge. Governments fall because of lack of knowledge. Well, actually, because of knowledge and lack of knowledge. And a country cannot stand if they don't know who they are and what they've done and why they've done it. That's why education matters. That's why educated voters are the ultimate power. The founding fathers were very big on that. And they warned what would happen if our voters were not educated. That was one of the reasons why they had kind of the strict requirements of who you had to be in order to vote. They wanted people that had skin in the game. I'm hard-pressed to argue against that based upon what's happened over the last 150 years. I can't undo history. I can't change what happened in the past, but it is helpful to understanding what's coming in the future and what's happening right now. And that directly ties into what I'm going to be doing for the next 2 weeks. So that's it. I'm a little over 20 minutes in. Thank you for joining me. And as always, I will see you on the other side.